I was working the front desk at a hotel in Prague when an American family walked in at 11 at night. They had just flown in from Texas. The dad looked exhausted. He dropped 3 massive suitcases on the floor and said he needed the air conditioning turned up because the room felt like a sauna. I told him there was no air conditioning. He stared at me like I had just told him the earth was flat. He said, "What do you mean, no air conditioning? This is a hotel." I explained that most European hotels don't have central AC because the climate doesn't require it. He got louder. He said he paid good money for this room and demanded I install an AC unit immediately. His wife touched his arm and whispered that maybe they could open a window. He looked at the window, then back at me and said, "But what about bugs?" I handed him the key and told him the windows had screens. They didn't, because European windows rarely do. He stood there, holding the key like it was a puzzle piece that didn't fit. If you've ever watched travelers collide with a different reality and thought, "I'd probably do the same thing," this channel unpacks exactly why that happens every week. Subscribe, and you'll start seeing these cultural gaps before they even appear. That same week, another American couple checked in and asked where the ice machine was. I said we don't have one. The woman looked genuinely confused. She said, "How do people get ice?" I told her she could request ice from the bar downstairs. She asked if it was free. I said no. She asked why Europeans hate ice so much. I didn't have an answer for that. Her husband said they would just drink warm soda then. He said it like it was a punishment he was accepting with dignity. 2 days later, a guy from California complained that his shower was broken. I went up to check. The shower was fine. He just didn't understand the European mixer tap. He kept turning the knob left and right, expecting separate hot and cold handles like back home. I showed him how it worked. He watched me demonstrate it twice. Then he said, "Why would anyone design it this way?" I told him most of the world uses this system. He said, "That doesn't make it right." Another guest called down at midnight, asking why the lights in his room kept turning off. I asked if he had taken his key card out of the slot by the door. He said yes, because he didn't want to lose it. I explained that European hotels use key card slots to control power in the room. You leave the card in the slot, the lights stay on. You take it out, everything shuts off to save energy. He asked what he was supposed to do if he wanted to leave the room. I told him to leave the card in the slot and take a different card from his wallet to put in there instead. He paused. Then he said, "That's the smartest thing I've heard all day." But he sounded annoyed about it. I was working at a boutique hotel in Amsterdam when a woman from Arizona checked in during a summer heat wave. It was 32 degrees Celsius outside. She asked if her room had air conditioning. I said it had a fan. She looked at me like I had offered her a candle to cool down with. She said, "A fan?" "Just a fan." I nodded. She asked how much the room cost per night. I told her. She said for that price she expected climate control. I explained that most historic European buildings aren't equipped for AC because they were built hundreds of years ago, and adding modern systems would damage the structure. She said, "So I'm supposed to suffer because the building is old?" I suggested she keep the curtains closed during the day and open the windows at night. Most people stop at the complaint. I look for the system underneath it, the habits, the assumptions, the small cultural code that shapes behavior. If decoding that kind of thing fascinates you, subscribing means you'll never miss the next hidden pattern. She asked if that actually worked. I said it's what locals do. She checked in but didn't look happy about it. That afternoon, she called down complaining that the fan was too loud. I offered to bring her a quieter model. She said that would be fine, but also asked if we could turn down the heating. I told her the heating wasn't on. It was summer. She insisted something was making the room hot. I went up to check. The room was warm because she had closed the windows and kept the curtains open, letting in direct sunlight all day. I explained this. She said she kept the windows closed because of street noise. I told her that's the trade-off: fresh air or silence. She asked why the windows didn't have better insulation. I didn't know how to explain that centuries-old buildings weren't designed with her specific comfort needs in mind. My coworker told me about a guest from Florida who complained that his room was freezing at night. It was spring. The temperature outside was 15 degrees Celsius. The guest had opened his window before bed because he was used to air conditioning at home. When he woke up cold, he assumed the heating was broken. My coworker explained that European hotels don't run heating and cooling simultaneously. You get heat in winter, nothing in summer, and in spring you're on your own. The guest asked what people did in spring. My coworker said, "Wear a sweater." The guest said that wasn't a solution. My coworker said it was literally the solution humans used for thousands of years. Another American asked if we could raise the temperature in the lobby because she was cold. It was August. The lobby didn't have heating on. She was cold because she was wearing shorts and a tank top. I suggested she go back to her room and grab a jacket. She said she didn't pack one because she was visiting Europe in summer. I told her European summers aren't like American summers. Evenings get cool. She said the weather app on her phone told her it would be 25 degrees. I said yes, Celsius. That's 77 Fahrenheit. And that's the daytime high. At night it drops to 15. She looked betrayed by her weather app. A man from Nevada asked if we had heated bathroom floors. I said no. He said his hotel in Dubai had them. I told him this wasn't Dubai. He said for the price he was paying, it should be. I asked if he had read the hotel description before booking. He said he didn't think he needed to because hotels were hotels. I told him European hotels operate differently than American ones. He asked in what ways. I said, almost all of them. Another guest complained that her room was too humid. I told her to open the window. She said she had, but it didn't help. I went to her room. She had opened the window, but also turned on the fan, which was just circulating the humid air. I explained that she needed cross ventilation. Open windows on opposite sides of the room if possible. She said her room only had one window. I told her that's how the building was designed. She asked if she could switch rooms. I checked availability. We had no other rooms. She asked if we had a dehumidifier. We didn't. She asked what people did about humidity in Europe. I said, live with it. She said that wasn't acceptable. I agreed it wasn't ideal, but it was reality. She spent the rest of her stay leaving reviews on travel websites about how European hotels don't care about guest comfort. A couple from Texas asked if they could adjust the thermostat in their room. I told them there wasn't one. They asked how they controlled the temperature. I said they couldn't. The heating was centrally controlled for the whole building. They asked what temperature it was set to. I said 20 degrees Celsius. They asked what that was in Fahrenheit. I said 68. The husband said that was too cold. I told him he could use the extra blankets in the closet. He opened the closet. He pulled out a duvet. He held it up and said, "This is it? One blanket?" I explained that European duvets are thicker than American comforters. He said it didn't look thick enough. His wife suggested they try it first before complaining. He agreed, but said if he woke up cold, he was calling down. He called down at 3 in the morning. He said he was cold. I told him there was nothing I could do about the central heating. He asked if I could bring more blankets. I brought 2 extra throws. He took them and said, "This better work." It didn't. He checked out early and left a 1-star review. I was working breakfast service at a hotel in Barcelona when an American guest asked where the pancakes were. I told him we didn't serve pancakes. We had croissants, bread, cheese, ham, fruit, yogurt, and coffee. He said, "That's it? That's breakfast?" I said yes. He asked if we had eggs. I pointed to the hard-boiled eggs. He said he meant scrambled or fried. I told him we only had hard-boiled. He asked if the kitchen could make scrambled eggs. I said the breakfast was buffet style only. He asked why. I said because that's how continental breakfast works. He said, "But I don't want continental breakfast. I want American breakfast." I told him he was in Spain. He said he knew that, but he was still American. Another guest asked if we had bacon. I showed him the jamon. He picked up a slice, looked at it, and said, "This isn't bacon." I told him it's Spanish cured ham. He said he wanted crispy bacon. I told him we didn't have that. He asked, what kind of hotel doesn't serve bacon? I said, most European ones. He walked away, shaking his head. A woman asked if we had peanut butter. We didn't. She asked if we had grape jelly. We didn't. She asked what people put on toast. I pointed to the butter, jam, and Nutella. She said, just that. I said yes. She took a croissant and plain butter and sat down, looking disappointed. Another American asked if the coffee was free. I said yes, it's included with breakfast. He poured himself a cup. He took a sip. He made a face. He asked if we had cream. I pointed to the milk. He said he wanted cream, not milk. I told him Europeans use milk in coffee. He said the coffee tasted bitter. I suggested he add sugar. He said he didn't use sugar. He wanted cream to make it smooth. I told him we had full-fat milk, which was the closest thing. He tried it. He said it wasn't the same. He asked if we had flavored creamer. I said no. He drank his coffee black and looked miserable doing it. My manager told me about a guest who complained that breakfast was too early. Breakfast hours were 7 to 10. The guest said in America, hotels serve breakfast until 11 or noon. My manager explained that European hotels have stricter schedules. The guest asked why. My manager said because the staff has other duties after breakfast service. The guest said that seemed inconvenient for guests. My manager said it's how things work here. The guest showed up at 10:15 the next morning and got upset when breakfast was already cleared away. A man from Chicago asked if we had orange juice. I pointed to the juice dispenser. He filled a glass. He drank it. He said, "This tastes weird." I asked what he meant. He said it didn't taste like orange juice. I told him it was freshly squeezed. He said, "Exactly. It tastes like oranges." I didn't understand the problem. He said he was used to Tropicana. I told him this was actual orange juice from actual oranges. He said it had pulp in it. I said, "That's because it's fresh." He said he didn't like pulp. I offered to strain it. He said never mind and switched to apple juice. Another guest asked if we had cereal. We did. We had muesli. He looked at it and asked if we had Frosted Flakes or Fruit Loops. I said no. He asked what kind of cereal we had. I said muesli and cornflakes. He took the cornflakes. He poured them into a bowl. He looked around and asked where the cold milk was. I pointed to the milk on the counter. He touched the container and said, "This isn't cold." I told him it's room temperature. He asked why. I said because that's how it's stored in Europe. He said milk needs to be refrigerated. I explained that UHT milk doesn't need refrigeration until it's opened. He asked what UHT meant. I said ultra heat treated. He said that sounded unnatural. He poured it anyway but didn't look comfortable about it. A woman asked if we had gluten-free options. I showed her the fruit and yogurt. She said she wanted bread. I told her we didn't have gluten-free bread. She asked if I could check with the kitchen. I checked. We didn't have any. She asked if the hotel could accommodate dietary restrictions. I said we could for lunch or dinner with advance notice, but breakfast was standard buffet. She said that wasn't fair to people with allergies. I agreed, but told her it wasn't my decision. She ate fruit and posted on social media about how European hotels don't care about gluten-free guests. A couple asked if they could take food back to their room. I said breakfast was meant to be eaten in the dining area. They asked why. I said it's hotel policy. They said in America, you can take continental breakfast to go. I told them this wasn't America. The husband said they had an early train and wouldn't have time to sit and eat. I told them they could grab a pastry and coffee quickly. He said they wanted to take a full plate. I said I couldn't allow that. He asked to speak to my manager. My manager said the same thing I did. They ate quickly and left, muttering about how inflexible European hotels were. Another guest asked if we served breakfast all day. I said no, only until 10. He said his hotel in Las Vegas had 24-hour breakfast. I told him that's not common in Europe. He asked what he was supposed to do if he got hungry after 10. I suggested he visit a cafe or restaurant. He said he already paid for breakfast at the hotel. I said yes, but only during breakfast hours. He said that seemed like a scam. I didn't respond to that. I was working at a hotel in Vienna when a guest called down asking where the closet was. I asked him to describe his room. He said there was a wardrobe against the wall. I told him that was the closet. He said, "No, I mean the walk-in closet." I told him European hotel rooms don't typically have walk-in closets. He said his room description mentioned a closet. I said yes, the wardrobe. He said that wasn't a closet. It was a cabinet. I explained that in Europe a wardrobe is a closet. He said it was too small. I asked how much clothing he brought. He said 4 suitcases for a week-long trip. I told him the wardrobe should fit a week's worth of clothes if he unpacked efficiently. He said he didn't want to unpack. He wanted to live out of his suitcases. I asked why he needed a bigger closet then. He hung up. Another guest complained that his room didn't have enough outlets. I asked how many he needed. He said at least 6. He had 2 phones, a tablet, a laptop, a camera, and a smartwatch to charge. I told him the room had 3 outlets. He said that wasn't enough. I offered to bring an extension cord. He said that was inconvenient. I agreed, but said it was the solution. He asked why European hotels didn't have more outlets. I told him older buildings weren't designed for modern electronics. He said hotels should renovate. I said many do, but it's expensive and slow. He said American hotels have outlets everywhere. I said American hotels are often newer. He took the extension cord but complained about it in his review. A woman asked why her room didn't have a coffee maker. I told her we serve coffee at breakfast. She said she wanted coffee in her room at 6 in the morning before breakfast started. I suggested she visit a nearby cafe. She said she didn't want to get dressed and go outside for coffee. I told her some European hotels don't provide in-room coffee because guests are expected to enjoy breakfast in the dining area. She said that was ridiculous. She asked if she could get a kettle. I brought her an electric kettle and instant coffee. She made a cup. She tasted it. She said it was terrible. I told her that's what instant coffee tastes like. She asked why we didn't have a proper coffee maker. I said, because most European guests don't expect one. A man from California asked why his TV only had European channels. I told him because he was in Europe. He asked if we had CNN or American sports. I checked. We didn't. He asked what he was supposed to watch. I suggested local channels or streaming services. He said he didn't speak German. I told him some channels had English audio options. He said he just wanted to watch normal TV. I didn't know what to tell him. Another guest called saying his toilet was broken. I went to check. The toilet was fine. He didn't understand the dual flush buttons. He kept pressing the wrong button and complaining that it didn't flush properly. I showed him how it worked. Small button for liquid waste, large button for solid waste. He asked why it was so complicated. I said it saves water. He said American toilets flush everything with one handle. I said American toilets also use more water. He said he didn't care about water conservation when he was on vacation. I told him the buttons weren't optional. He had to use them correctly or the toilet wouldn't flush. He said this was the worst hotel experience he'd ever had because of a toilet button. A couple asked why their beds were so small. They had booked a double room. The bed was a standard European double, about 140 centimeters wide. They said their bed at home was bigger. I told them European doubles are smaller than American doubles. They asked if they could get a bigger bed. I said we had king rooms available, but they cost more. They said they didn't want to pay extra. They asked if we could push 2 twin beds together. I said that's what a double room is. They looked at the bed again. The wife said, "We're going to be touching all night." The husband said they'd manage. They didn't. They called down at 2 in the morning asking for separate rooms. We were fully booked. They spent the rest of their stay exhausted and cranky. Another guest asked where the mini fridge was. I told him European hotel rooms don't always have fridges unless specifically mentioned. He asked where he was supposed to keep his drinks cold. I said he could request ice from the bar or buy drinks as needed. He said that was inefficient. I agreed but said that's how it works. He asked if he could get a fridge brought to his room. I told him we didn't have spare fridges. He said he needed one because he had medication that required refrigeration. I told him he should have mentioned that when booking. He said he didn't think he needed to. I arranged for his medication to be stored in the staff fridge and brought to him as needed. He said it was embarrassing having to ask staff for his medication multiple times a day. I told him it was the only solution. A woman complained that her room was too dark. The curtains were closed. I opened them. She said the room was still dark. I turned on the lights. She said they weren't bright enough. I told her that's the lighting the room has. She asked if I could bring a lamp. I brought a desk lamp. She said it still wasn't bright enough. She said American hotels have better lighting. I told her European hotels tend to use softer lighting for ambiance. She said she didn't want ambiance. She wanted to see. I offered to switch her to a room with more windows. She accepted. The new room had 2 windows instead of 1. She said it was better, but still not as bright as she'd like. I was working the night shift at a hotel in Berlin when an American guest came down to the lobby at midnight. He looked frustrated. He said he couldn't figure out how to adjust the radiator in his room. I asked if he had tried turning the knob. He said he did, but nothing happened. I went up to check. The radiator was old-fashioned with a manual valve. He had been turning it the wrong direction. I showed him how it worked. He watched me do it. Then he said, "Why don't you just have digital thermostats?" I told him many European buildings use older heating systems. He said it seemed backwards. I said it's just different. He went back to his room, but I could tell he wasn't satisfied with that answer. The thing about European hotels is they're not trying to be difficult. They're built for European guests who have different expectations. Americans are used to certain comforts that feel standard to them, but aren't standard everywhere else. Air conditioning, ice machines, big beds, bright lights, unlimited outlets, free refills, 24-hour services. These things exist in America because American hotels compete on convenience. European hotels compete on location, history, and charm. When Americans visit Europe, they're not just staying in a different hotel. They're entering a different system with different priorities. Europeans don't need their drinks ice cold. They don't need their rooms freezing in summer or heated in spring. They're fine with smaller beds and softer lighting. They expect to adapt to the space rather than the space adapting to them. The problem isn't that American guests are wrong to want what they're used to. The problem is assuming everywhere works like home. Hotels in Asia operate differently than European hotels. Hotels in South America have their own quirks. American hotels have rules and norms that would confuse international visitors too. My coworker told me about a guest who left a review saying our hotel felt like staying in someone's old house. She meant it as a complaint. But that's exactly what many European hotels are. Converted buildings with history and character. They're not designed to be perfect. They're designed to be real. The Americans who enjoy European hotels are the ones who accept this. They don't fight the system. They open windows instead of demanding air conditioning. They drink room temperature milk without complaining. They figure out the shower taps and the toilet buttons and the heating valves. They adapt. The ones who struggle are the ones who expect Europe to feel like a themed version of America. It's not. It's Europe. And European hotels are going to feel European. That's not a flaw. That's the point. If you see the world the way I do, not as right or wrong, just endlessly explainable, this is the kind of perspective I build every week. Subscribe, not to support me, but to keep sharpening the way you see people. But I'll say this. After working in hotels for years, I've learned that Americans aren't the only ones who get confused abroad. Everyone struggles with unfamiliar systems. The difference is how you handle it. You can get frustrated and write bad reviews, or you can laugh at yourself and learn something new. Most guests eventually choose the second option, usually right before they check out.